sweet like a buttercup. You're a Barbie doll. Show them all what I'm made of. Strut down the hall. Won't stop till I get enough.
All right, everybody, buckle up. Because today we are taking a deep dive into something truly massive, SpaceX's Starship and that wild test flight they just pulled off.
Yeah, this thing's a beast.
It really is. I mean, the most powerful rocket ever built. And the test flight, well,
It was something else.
definitely had some serious drama.
Triumph.
Yeah, and some,
Let's call it excitement.
yeah, excitement. Haha. So before we get into all that, let's quickly lay out what happened,
Sure. So SpaceX launched Starship.
right? And this was just a test flight. Gotta remember that.
Right, a test flight. And the booster did its thing, came back down, landed like a champ, but Starship itself.
Yeah, the part that was actually supposed to go into space.
Right, that part broke up.
It did. And we're going to get into all the details of what might have caused that and what it means for SpaceX and, you know, their whole Mars mission. But first, got to give credit where credit's due. We're basing this whole deep dive on a great article from CBS News about the event. So,
Definitely check that out.
yeah, they had some great reporting and insights. So, okay, mission for today's deep dive.
Well, we got to unpack what happened with this test flight, right? Figure out what went wrong with Starship,
Right.
and then bigger picture. You know, what does this all mean for the future of space travel?
Exactly, because this isn't just about one rocket exploding or not exploding. This is about potentially changing the way we think about space travel. So let's start at the beginning.
Okay.
Well, that's where it all begins. And this rocket,
I think 33 Raptor engines.
33, burning methane, by the way, which
Wow.
is,
Which is pretty wild when you think about it.
it is, yeah. And all those engines combined generated 16 million pounds of thrust.
It's hard to even comprehend that kind of power.
I know, right? And it was consuming fuel like crazy, 40,000 pounds of propellant every single second.
Like imagine a swimming pool,
Yeah.
and it's just draining in seconds.
That's how much fuel this thing was guzzling.
Just insane amounts of power.
Now, the booster, the super heavy booster, it actually did its job perfectly, came back down for a landing.
And that landing was something else.
Oh, man. It was, I mean, picture this massive rocket coming back down to Earth, and it lands right between these two giant mechanical arms.
They call them chopsticks.
Yeah, chopsticks. And it just settles down gently like it's no big deal.
It's like something out of a movie.
It really is. And this isn't just for show, right? This reusability thing.
Right. It's at the heart of SpaceX's whole vision.
Okay. So explain that.
Think about it.
Yeah.
Traditionally, rockets are like one-time use. You launch them, they fall into the ocean. Go.
It's super expensive.
Exactly. But SpaceX, they want to change that. They want to make rockets like airplanes. You land them, refuel them, and fly again.
Okay, so it's like the difference between buying a new car every time you drive somewhere versus...
Versus having your own car that you can just keep using.
Yeah, exactly. And that could make space travel so much cheaper.
And so much more accessible. Imagine if airplanes were single-use. Only billionaires could fly.
Right.
That's kind of where we are with space travel right now. SpaceX wants to change that.
So this booster landing, it's a big deal.
Huge deal. It's proof that their vision of reusability can actually work.
Okay, so the booster aced the test. What about Starship itself? The spacecraft, the part that was supposed to detach and go into space.
Well, that's where things got a little,
How complicated.
yeah, a little complicated. During the ascent, they lost telemetry.
Wait, so they couldn't see what was happening?
Right. It's like suddenly going blind hundreds of miles above Earth with $1 billion spacecraft.
Oh, man, talk about stressful.
And then, yeah, confirmation came Starship had broken up.
Broken up meaning?
SpaceX being SpaceX, they called it a rapid unscheduled disassembly,
Haha, classic SpaceX, always with the humor.
even when things go boom.
Right, but you know, they're serious about figuring out what went wrong.
Oh, absolutely. They'll be poring over every bit of data they can get.
And it's not just an abstract problem, right? I mean, pieces of this thing ended up near the Turks and Caicos Islands.
Yeah. It's a reminder that space travel has real-world consequences.
Yeah.
It's not just some theoretical thing happening way out there.
So what caused this disassembly?
Well, Elon Musk actually chimed in on this whole thing.
Of course he did. He loves X.
Right. He posted on X, speculating that it might have been an oxygen fuel leak.
A leak? That sounds kind of small to cause such a big problem.
Well, he thinks it might have been in a really bad spot above the engine firewall.
Okay, so the firewall is like...
It's like a barrier in a building meant to stop fires from spreading.
Right, to contain things.
Exactly. In a rocket engine, it's there to contain any explosions.
Ah, so if you have a leak above that...
Pressure can build up really fast and boom.
Rapid unscheduled disassembly.
Exactly.
Wow. Okay, so we've got this dramatic launch and then this whole Starship situation. But we got to remember the main goal of this test flight wasn't even to reach orbit.
Right. This was all about testing new tech.
Like what?
Well, they were trying to restart a Raptor engine in space.
Which is hard.
Super hard.
Yeah.
You're in a vacuum, no air to work with.
And why is that important?
For future missions, if you want to go to Mars or even the moon, you need to be able to restart engines in space.
Makes sense. What else are they testing?
They were testing a new way to deploy Starlink satellites.
Oh, yeah, those things are everywhere.
Right, and they were trying to make them pop out like a Pez dispenser.
Okay, that is a funny visual, I gotta admit.
Right.
Yeah.
But seriously, precise satellite deployment is super important for all sorts of things, communication, navigation.
Right, so even though this test flight didn't go perfectly, it was still valuable.
Oh, definitely. Tons of data, collected tons of lessons learned.
And Starship itself had a bunch of upgrades from previous versions.
Yeah, they're constantly tweaking the design.
Give us some examples.
Smaller fins for better aerodynamics, upgraded avionics, more fuel capacity, redesigned fuel lines.
So they're really refining this thing step by step.
Exactly. Each test flight, even the ones that don't go perfectly, they're learning and improving.
It's all building towards something bigger, right?
Oh, yeah.
Huh?
This is all about getting us beyond Earth orbit, to the moon, to Mars, and maybe even beyond.
And that brings us to NASA and their Artemis program. They're aiming to put humans back on the moon by 2027.
And guess who they've tapped to build their lunar lander?
SpaceX.
SpaceX. They're going to use a modified Starship to get astronauts down to the lunar surface.
So the astronauts would launch on NASA's Orion spacecraft, travel to the moon, and then...
And then they'd rendezvous with the Starship in lunar orbit.
Okay, but here's the thing. A trip to the moon and back takes a ton of fuel.
A ton. So much so that they need to refuel the Starship in orbit.
Wait, what? Refuel in orbit? How do you even do that?
It's wild. They're going to launch multiple Starship tankers,
Yeah.
basically giant fuel trucks into orbit.
Okay.
These tankers will dock with the lunar Starship and transfer propellant.
Like a cosmic gas station.
Exactly. It's a super complex maneuver, all done autonomously.
No astronauts guiding those tankers in.
Nope. It's all software sensors, precision timing.
Wow, that is mind-blowing.
Okay.
I think that's a good place to pause for now. We'll continue this deep dive after a short break. Stay tuned. So before the break, we were trying to wrap our heads around refueling a Starship in orbit.
It's like a sci-fi concept, but they're actually going to do it.
It's crucial if we're serious about lunar landings and eventually Mars missions.
It really highlights how far we've come in space exploration, you know.
Okay, how so?
Think about those early transatlantic flights.
Way back in the day.
Yeah. Planes didn't have the range to fly across the ocean all at once.
So they had to.
They had to land on islands to refuel.
Ah, so it's kind of like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This orbital refueling is like the space-age version of island hopping.
Makes sense. So multiple Starship tankers meet up with the lunar Starship in Earth orbit.
Yeah.
Dock, transfer fuel, and then off to the moon.
That's the plan. But think about the scale of this.
Yeah, these Starships are huge.
A fully fueled Starship is taller than the Statue of Liberty
No way.
and heavier than 1,000 elephants.
Okay, now I'm picturing 1,000 elephants in space.
It's pretty wild. And they're trying to dock 2 of these giants in orbit.
And all autonomously right. No one's steering those tankers by hand.
Nope. It's all done with software sensors and a whole lot of math.
That software must be insane.
It has to calculate everything. Orbital mechanics, fuel flow rates, temperatures,
And gravity from the moon and sun.
everything. It's a massive challenge.
Okay, so given all that and the whole Starship breaking up thing, is that 2027 lunar landing actually realistic?
It's a tough question. SpaceX has surprised us before.
I mean, they made reusable rockets a reality.
Exactly. No one thought they could pull that off, but they did.
Well, maybe they can make this work too.
Maybe? But Starship is a whole different animal.
More complex.
Way more complex.
Yeah.
And this orbital refueling thing, it's still in its early stages.
Plus, NASA is going to be super cautious about putting astronauts on this thing.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
They'll want to see a successful uncrewed landing first.
And what about the FAA? Are they okay with all this?
Well, after this latest incident, they're definitely going to be taking a closer look.
So maybe some delays are inevitable.
Probably. But setbacks are part of space exploration. It's always been that way.
It's about pushing the limits of what's possible and learning from mistakes.
Exactly. And SpaceX's ultimate goal is even more ambitious than the moon.
Mars.
Right. Mars. Elon Musk wants to put people on Mars within the next decade.
That's not a lot of time.
It's a tight timeline.
Mars is so much farther than the moon.
Millions of miles farther.
And the environment there is brutal.
Thin atmosphere, freezing temperatures, radiation everywhere.
Not exactly a vacation destination.
No, you wouldn't be strolling around on Mars without a spacesuit.
So we'd be living in habitats, venturing out only when necessary.
Like those early Antarctic explorers.
Stuck inside for months at a time.
Except on Mars, it could be years.
And imagine the isolation being millions of miles from Earth.
With limited communication.
Yeah, it'd be tough psychologically.
We'd need astronauts who are not just physically fit, but mentally tough.
People who can handle being cooped up with the same small group for years.
And who can solve problems, think creatively, stay calm under pressure.
And what about the everyday stuff, like food and water?
We'd have to grow food in Martian soil, recycle water.
Generate our own energy, deal with waste.
It'd be like creating a miniature Earth.
Self-sustaining and completely isolated.
Exactly.
And our bodies weren't designed for Mars.
Right. We evolved in Earth's gravity. We breathe Earth's air.
Mars has low gravity and almost no atmosphere.
Plus, there's the radiation.
We'd need serious medical advancements to survive there long term.
Maybe even genetic modifications.
That opens a whole can of ethical worms.
It does.
Huh.
But if we want to live on Mars, these are the things we'll have to consider.
So SpaceX's Mars timeline is super ambitious.
It is.
Yeah.
Maybe even impossible with current technology.
But they've surprised us before.
They have. But even if we can solve the technical challenges, there are bigger questions.
Like ethical ones, philosophical ones.
Exactly. What kind of society would we create on Mars?
Would we try to replicate Earth or build something totally new?
And what about the Martian environment itself? Do we have the right to alter it?
So many things to consider. This is getting deep.
It is. But these are the questions we need to be asking as we venture further into space.
Okay, I think we're ready to shift gears a bit. We've talked about the challenges, but what about the human side of this?
What would it actually be like to live on Mars?
To wake up every day on a different planet.
That's where things get really interesting.
So let's explore those questions in the final part of our deep dive into SpaceX Starship and the future of humanity in space. Stay with us.
All right, we're back and ready to tackle the big question. What would it actually be like to live on Mars?
I think it's something we all wonder about, you know?
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking about the rockets, the fuel, the technical stuff, but what about the human side of all this?
What would it feel like to wake up on Mars, look out the window, and see a red sky?
To know that Earth is just a tiny dot, millions of miles away.
It's mind-blowing to think about.
It's exciting, but also kind of scary, right? Like, we evolved on Earth. We're used to things here.
Mars is a completely different world.
And not exactly a welcoming one.
The atmosphere is thin, temperatures are extreme, there's radiation everywhere.
So no leisurely walks on Mars.
Not without a spacesuit. More like living in pressurized habitats, venturing out only when absolutely necessary.
It'd be like those early Antarctic explorers.
Yeah, stuck inside for months on end with just a small group of people.
Only on Mars, it could be years.
And the isolation, that distance from Earth.
Communication delays would make real-time conversations impossible.
It'd be tough on anyone psychologically.
We need astronauts who are incredibly resilient mentally and emotionally stable.
People who can handle extreme pressure and being far from everything familiar.
Yeah, and they'd need to be able to solve problems, think on their feet.
And what about the practical stuff? How would we survive on a daily basis?
We'd have to grow our own food in Martian soil, recycle water, generate energy.
Deal with waste in a sustainable way.
It'd be like building a self-contained ecosystem.
A mini Earth on Mars.
Essentially, yeah. And then there's the impact on our bodies.
Right. We evolved for Earth's gravity and atmosphere.
Mars has low gravity, which could lead to bone loss, muscle atrophy.
And the thin atmosphere offers little protection from radiation.
We'd need advanced medical technology, maybe even genetic modifications.
To adapt to the Martian environment.
Which raises a whole host of ethical questions.
It's incredible to think about all the challenges, but also the potential rewards.
I mean, imagine discovering life on Mars.
Or finding evidence of past life.
It would change everything we know about our place in the universe.
And beyond the scientific discoveries, what about the social and cultural impact?
What kind of society would we create on Mars?
Would we try to replicate Earth or do things completely differently?
Would we have a Martian government, Martian laws?
It's like starting a new chapter in human history.
A fresh start on a new world.
But we have to be responsible, too. We can't just go to Mars and exploit it.
Right. We've seen what's happened on Earth.
We need to learn from our mistakes.
We need to consider the ethical implications of colonizing another planet.
Especially if there's any chance of native Martian life.
Protecting that potential life should be a top priority.
I agree. We need to be stewards of Mars and not conquerors.
Well, it sounds like we have a lot to figure out before we start packing our bags for Mars.
We do. But that's part of what makes it so exciting.
It's a challenge that will push humanity to its limits.
And maybe even beyond.
It's about exploration, innovation, and ultimately expanding our understanding of the universe.
And ourselves.
Exactly.
Right.
So that wraps up our deep dive into SpaceX's Starship test flight and the future it points towards.
We've covered a lot of ground, from the technical details to the ethical dilemmas.
But one thing is clear, this is just the beginning.
The journey to Mars is long and full of challenges.
But it's a journey worth taking.
Absolutely. And who knows what incredible discoveries await us along the way.
That's something to think about. So, as always, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of space exploration.
Keep looking up, keep asking questions, and keep dreaming big.
We'll see you next time.
Sound the alarm. I'm coming up. We'll have a ball. I'm sweet like a buttercup. You're a Barbie doll. Show them all what I'm made of. Strut down the hall. Won't stop till I